I'll admit that few things shock me these days, but what's happening with the Epstein case goes beyond any limit of political decency. What once seemed like just another scandal involving powerful figures has now revealed itself as a true test of our country's morality. And honestly, what shocks me most isn't the crime itself, because there have always been monsters disguised as respectable people, but the silence. The complicit, cowardly and orchestrated silence from those who should be demanding transparency. I see a government hiding behind pretty speeches, promises of justice and moral reform, yet doing the exact opposite when the issue threatens the top of the pyramid. It's astonishing how suddenly the same people who shouted for truth and an end to impunity now change the subject, look away, and pretend nothing is happening. The Epstein case isn't just a story of corruption and human trafficking, it's a mirror showing how rotten the structure governing us is, and how far they're willing to go to bury the truth to protect their own. Congress, which should be the voice of the people, has turned into a theater of convenience. We watch, stunned, as representatives and senators pretend to debate morality while maneuvering to hide documents, block votes, and ultimately protect the names that must never be revealed. The system that always promised transparency now shows its darkest face, that of a cover-up. And what's worse is seeing a portion of the press, the very institution that should investigate, helping to smother the truth, using the old trick of shifting focus to some other more banal scandal that's easier to control. You know what terrifies me? It's that when someone dares to demand answers, they're immediately attacked. They're labeled conspiracy theorists, extremists, or enemies of democracy, as if wanting the truth were wrong, as if demanding justice were an act of rebellion, and all of this under a government that claims to defend freedom, but acts like a warden of information. The Epstein case is a turning point because it exposes the most dangerous mechanism of power, the use of bureaucracy and censorship to protect the powerful. The same people who lecture about morality and good conduct are the ones trying at all costs to lock away files, erase evidence, and silence inconvenient voices. And when even lawmakers try to force the release of these documents, the government moves like a blocking machine, changing rules, creating obstacles, and turning transparency into a minefield. This isn't about left or right, it's about decency. It's about looking into the eyes of the victims, their families, and the people and saying, we want to know the truth, no matter who it hurts. But this government seems afraid of the truth. Because in this case, the truth could be devastating. It could reveal connections that go far beyond what we imagine. Names, institutions, politicians, business people, high-profile figures who always thought themselves untouchable. And that's exactly why the silence is so deafening. Because the more they stay quiet, the more obvious their fear becomes. And when power is afraid, it's a sign that something very big is being hidden. The people, however, aren't fools. They're starting to see the manipulation, the censorship disguised as institutional responsibility. The game is becoming clear. Protect those at the top and distract those at the bottom. Meanwhile, they continue trying to turn any critical voice into an enemy. It's the old tactic, discredit those who speak out so no one else dares to raise their head. But anyone who's lived long enough to see governments promise change and deliver filth can recognize the pattern. What we're seeing now is more of the same. A government that claims to serve the truth, but fears the day it comes to light. And I honestly believe that day is coming. Because no lie lasts forever. No power structure can withstand the weight of its own contradictions. And when this castle of secrets begins to crumble, it will fall on the heads of those who built it. When I look at what's happening inside Congress, I see a ready-made script of how a government tries to bury the truth in broad daylight. The arrival of new lawmakers supporting the release of Epstein's files should have been a historic moment of unity and courage. But what happened? As soon as they realized the vote could actually take place, the powerful began moving behind the scenes. And when power starts moving like that, you can be sure there's something big behind it. Suddenly there are changes in the rules, new criteria, technical adjustments, always the same talk, the same trick. The system invents 1,000 barriers to keep the people from seeing what's behind the curtain. They talk about national security, judicial secrecy, and preserving the integrity of institutions. But no one buys those excuses anymore. When they say they're protecting the institutions, they're really protecting themselves and their allies, and that's not all. There's an entire network of protection built around the names that must never surface. There are bankers, business people, politicians, artists, and international figures who, according to investigations, had dealings and relationships with Epstein. And what does the government do? Nothing. Or rather, it does everything to ensure no one finds out anything. A mission has become state policy. I wonder, since when does the government have the right to decide what the people can or cannot know? When did we let a handful of bureaucrats decide which truths are acceptable? What else are they hiding? Because if they're so afraid to open these files, it's because the content is explosive. No one works this hard to hide something if it's irrelevant. And that's where the danger lies, when institutionalized lies become tools of power. Censorship no longer comes with tanks and soldiers. It comes with prepared speeches, technical reports, and veiled threats. And those who dare to challenge the system are labeled, attacked, and cancelled. This is how authoritarian governments strengthen themselves, not through physical force, but through psychological manipulation and the cowardice of those who remain silent. The few who still have the courage to speak out are immediately targeted. Lawmakers and journalists demanding the release of the files are treated as enemies of the state, and ironically, those who claim to defend free speech are the first to silence dissent. It's the old, hypocritical discourse: freedom only matters when it serves them. Meanwhile, the country remains divided. On one side, the people demanding transparency. On the other, the government building walls of silence. And the worst part, there are people within the political field who call themselves the opposition, but hide, afraid of losing positions, funding, and privileges. This institutional cowardice is the fuel that keeps the system standing. What outrages me most is seeing how the mainstream media participates in this. Once, journalism's role was to investigate power. Today, its role seems to be to protect power. Major outlets have become the government's official mouthpieces. They ignore, distort, or simply pretend the issue doesn't exist. And the people, tired of lies, turn to social media for what they can no longer find in newspapers: the truth. But even social media isn't free. Digital persecution is real. When someone speaks too much, their content disappears, their reach vanishes, their account is suspended, all in the name of security and truth. It's the new authoritarianism, clean, digital, and wrapped in good intentions. At the center of all this is the same government that promised transparency, swore to defend freedom, and now behaves like the guardian of secrets. They want to convince the country that the Epstein case is a closed matter. But how can it be closed when there are thousands of pages of documents, recordings, names, and transactions that have never been made public? The people have the right to know who benefited, who participated, and who covered it up. The truth is that the Epstein case touches on something much bigger than an isolated scandal. It reveals a global power structure where money and influence matter more than the law. And our government, instead of fighting this, prefers to protect those within this circle. This isn't neutrality, it's complicity. That's why, when I see the government and its base trying to change the rules to prevent Congress from voting, I understand it's not just fear, it's desperation. Because they know that if the truth comes out, the castle collapses. And in that castle, there are a lot of powerful people. people who pretend to defend the public while living off the system that oppresses it. We've reached a point where corruption is no longer just a political problem. It's become a way of life within the government. And the Epstein case has exposed this in a way no one can pretend not to see. The desperate attempt to hide these files is more than a simple act of cowardice. It's a confession that there's a rotten system, sustained by people who fear the light of truth. And what's most terrifying is seeing how they try to normalize this darkness, as if it were natural for the state to decide what citizens can or cannot know. I refuse to accept this. I refuse to live in a country where truth is treated as a threat, where demanding justice has become synonymous with radicalism, and where public power behaves like a cult that protects its own members while sacrificing the people in the name of institutional stability. This isn't stability, it's moral decay. And the most ironic thing is that when these same politicians were in the opposition, they spoke beautifully. They promised to clean up the system, said they would confront corruption, expose secrets, and end privileges. But as soon as they came to power, they became exactly what they claimed to fight. Their discourse on morality became a shield to hide their own crimes. It's the perfect portrait of a government that lives on appearances, propaganda, and narratives designed to deceive those who work, pay taxes, and still believe in justice. But the people are waking up. Indignation is growing. With every attempt at censorship, with every lie exposed, more people realize something is deeply wrong. And this awakening is what terrifies those at the top the most. Because an awakened people are dangerous to the corrupt. They want an anesthetized, distracted, divided country. They want you to believe that demanding the truth makes you an extremist. They want you to feel guilty for distrusting the government. And that's exactly where we need to resist. Resisting isn't about taking up arms. It's about finding courage. It's about not accepting the silence imposed by those afraid to answer. It's about speaking even when they try to silence you. It's about sharing information, demanding transparency, and insisting that every penny, every decision, and every secret be exposed to the light of day. Because those who foot the bill have the right to know what's being hidden behind closed doors. The Epstein case, as distant as it may seem, is a mirror of what's happening here. The abuse of power, institutionalized corruption, and the impunity of the elite. The names change, the country changes, but the mechanism is the same. Money buys silence, power buys loyalty, and the people are left outside with crumbs and promises. And if the current government believes it can keep feeding this cycle of lies, it's mistaken. The truth is stubborn. It slips through cracks, through leaks, through voices that refuse to be silenced. And one day, when everything comes to light, no one will be able to say they didn't know. I look at all this and think, how did we get here? How did we let a handful of people turn the state into a personal shield, a hiding place for crimes, and more? How long will we accept this as normal? We can no longer wait for the system to correct itself. We can no longer believe that those who profit from the filth will care about cleaning it up. Change will only happen when the people stop being afraid of being called radicals, afraid of losing friends, afraid of being cancelled. Fear is the corrupt's most powerful weapon, and that's why I speak, because silence is complicit. I'd rather be wrong speaking out than right staying quiet. And if there are still those who believe it's an exaggeration, a conspiracy theory, let them keep believing. History will prove them wrong. When these files finally come to light, and they will, many will realize that the real extremism was always on the side of those who used power to hide the truth. The government can try to erase the traces, intimidate and lie, but it cannot defeat time. The truth has an irritating habit of appearing when least expected, and when it does, it will expose everyone who tried to bury it. And then, finally, perhaps, the country will wake up for good. I still believe that day will come, and when it does, I want to be on the side of those who had courage. on the side of those who didn't bow to fear, who didn't sell out for positions, and who didn't stay silent for convenience. Because in the end, it's not about politics, it's about character. And a government's character is measured by its relationship with the truth, and this government, which hides, censors and lies, has already shown what its character is.